his reaction actually quite surprised me, because you'd think that as your doctor, he would want to do what works for you and what, if you're feeling good, carry on, sort of thing. But no, he basically said, it's a bad idea, don't do it. And if I don't listen to what he's saying and take the drugs that he wants me to take, then my Crohn's, because I've got such an aggressive form of Crohn's, would spread to my part of my small bowel that absorbs all your nutrients. He says, look, if we have to take that away, which is likely, then your life expectancy is very, very low. And yeah, sorry, um, I couldn't quite believe it. So
I didn't know what you were going to say. Greg, welcome back.
thank you for having me.
Great to have you back. So I understand you've got some MRI results that you'd like to share. Um, you've been on once before, and I wonder, for people who haven't seen your first interview, if maybe before you go into the MRI results, if you could please share maybe a summary of how you found Carnivore and what happened as you
Yeah,
started Carnivore.
yeah, no problem. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at the age of 15. Um, I basically was going to the toilet 20 plus times a day, um, quite often not making it in time. I used to have to carry a bag of clothes around with me, like spare clothes and things, just in case. Um, Once I was diagnosed, they put me on a series of different drugs, lots of different trials, none of which really seemed to help. They did look at things like diet, but they gave me things like a liquid diet, to try and rest my bowel. I don't know what was in that stuff, but it didn't work anyway. Um, and this went on for quite a while, many, many years, into my 20s. And then when I was in my early 20s, um, they said to me, you've got two options. One is to take this drug that's experimental, which contains mouse DNA, which I didn't really fancy doing. And the other one is that we remove all your large bowel and your rectum, and you have what's called an ileostomy. Um, and I went with that because to me it just seemed like the right thing to do. So I had that operation, and when they talked to me afterwards, they said that I had done the right thing because my large bowel had just completely rotten away. It was pretty much useless. Um, so yeah, I definitely did the right thing. And moving forward from there, I was in and out of hospital a few times with blockages. I was just getting used to what I could and couldn't eat, and the scar tissue and things like that were causing a few issues. Eventually, that settled down, and then they just put me on a series of autoimmune suppressing drugs. Some were successful in that they helped with the symptoms, but only obviously the symptoms, not the cause, as we know now. And along with those came a myriad of other issues, lots of side effects, not very nice. And then eventually, after a certain time, that particular drug that they put me on would then stop working, and I had to go on another drug, and so on and so forth. And this sort of has been my pretty much my life, really, on and off drugs and different trials and things. And then the last, I would say, 3 years or so, things really started to get really bad. I was admitted to A&E 3 times in the space of about 6 months, just something like that. It seemed like a very short space of time between each one, simply because I was getting a lot of pain and blockages. I hadn't changed anything in my diet that I wasn't able to eat before. So obviously something had changed inside me that didn't seem to like what I was doing anymore. Um, every time I went, they'd put me on painkillers, and eventually things would move on. And then the worst one I had was when I was admitted to A&E from work, and I got to the hospital, and I basically it couldn't come out my bag, so it had to come out my other part of my body. So they thought that my bowel had ruptured at that point, so that was pretty scary. But again, they looked at the scans and they said, "Oh, all we can see is a little bit of bowel narrowing. We can't really see anything more than that." So I was quite surprised, because I was thinking, all these things are happening to me. There's something's wrong. And at that point, I think last time I mentioned, without any context actually, that I was blending my food. Well, the reason that I did that was to give my body a chance at digesting it, essentially. So I was like digesting it, if you like. So that's basically what was happening to me. I was just in pain every single day for quite a while, and I was blending all my food. This was before Carnivore, so I was blending whatever it was that I was eating in a blender, adding water to make it more stodgy and easier to get down. Obviously, that's not great, but you get used to it, and it seemed to help. Nothing was getting stuck or anything like that, but I did still feel pretty rubbish. And we got to the point where I had a consultation with my doctor, and he says, "Look, you've really only got one option, and that is to go on this drug called infliximab, which was the drug at the very beginning of my diagnosis that I didn't want to take." So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to do it. So I did, and they also put me in touch with a dietitian at that point as well. So I went ahead with it, and
Sorry, I've got to add here. Problem solved. Dietitian comes into the picture.
oh yeah, just add a dietitian in there to the mix, with the drugs, and there you go, fixed. Yeah. So I did this for a while, and you basically go to hospital, you sit in a semicircle with a load of other people hooked up to a machine, and you sit there for about an hour. It's pretty boring. And they come around and give you tea and biscuits and things like that to try and raise your spirits. And I think I had maybe 2 or 3, and I started to get these weird side effects. So I was noticing when I had the infusion, I was off work for 4 days afterwards every time. I would just completely, know how really. My vision, my balance, I was getting headaches and all kinds of strange things. And in the meantime, my Crohn's symptoms weren't getting any better. So at that point, I sort of spoke to the inflammatory bowel disease team, and they said, "Oh no, you have to give it 6 weeks, and then that's when you'll start to see improvements." I was like, "Oh, 6 weeks seems like a long time, but okay, because this drug's pretty strong." So I went with it. So 6 weeks came, still in pain, no changes, still all over the place with all these side effects. And I think around that point, I found out I was going to be a dad, which is pretty incredible. So for me, then I had a bit of a mind shift, and I thought, I can't carry on like this, because we're going to have a newborn baby. My partner's going to be looking after the baby and also looking after me. I've got to do something about this. So I basically rang my specialist, and I says, I don't want to do this anymore. There's got to be an alternative option. I said, because it's just making me feel absolutely rubbish. So he says, okay, well, we'll take you off it. But what we will do is send you leaflets for 3 other drugs, basically the same drug, that we think will be better suited for you. I was like, he says, just read over the literature and then get back to me. And in the meantime, I think the dietitian's going to be ringing you to discuss that side of things. I was like, yeah, okay. So the literature came. I'll be honest, I didn't read it because I knew they were all the same anyway. Let's face it, they all do this very similar things. That they all have different side effects. So I didn't really bother. There was that point where I started to look into Carnivore, and I found Dr. Chafee, and he did a short on Crohn's disease, actually, saying that the carnivore diet had been used for a long time to treat autoimmune issues and Crohn's disease and things like that. So that piqued my interest. And then, as everyone else does, you sort of go down the rabbit hole from there. And I found that people like yourself and Coach Stephen, Keto Pro, Dr. Berry's the biggest one. And then I eventually found Professor Bart Kay, which was the real eye opener for me, the scientific side of it. So I was gaining all this knowledge about nutrition and human biology, which I never even thought I'd learn or even knew that existed, which is the case for a lot of people. Because when you tell them these things, they're like, "Nah, you're talking rubbish." But yeah, so it was pretty good. So I was learning this stuff. I thought, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. So I'm an all-in kind of guy. So, and then that's not great when you're on carnivore, because they always tell you, which I found out later, to gradually transition. But I jumped straight in, and I was still blending my food at that time. So I was blending on whatever it was I was eating. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to blend my carnivore food too. Otherwise, I might struggle to get it down, because obviously I know now that meat is the most absorbable thing you can eat. So technically, I shouldn't have an issue, but I didn't know at the time. So I basically fried up a steak, eggs, and sometimes bacon, not always, and sausage meat sometimes. Put it in a blender, put a bit of water in there, blend it all up, and that would be my dinner. It was pretty gross in terms of how it looked, but it tasted absolutely incredible. Like, just it brought such a my body was just like so grateful, I think, because I just felt so amazing just eating this mush. So I carried on mushing everything up for a couple of months, I think. And then I thought, I'm going to try eating something that isn't mush. So I would try eating a bit of bacon, and I could eat it, no pain. That's pretty cool. I also noticed pretty quickly, actually, in the first week of starting carnivore, that stabbing pain that I had completely vanished. So the pain completely went away. And also, there was no bloating. That went away as well. And then I started to feel different, like more energetic, and I just felt generally better. That was just after a week, which I thought was pretty sweet. And then I carried on, and then I started to experiment with what I could eat in the solid form. So I was eating, I could then eat a steak, whole steak, which I would never have dreamed of doing before without, mushing it up in some way. So, and then I had no digestive issues afterwards, like no pain. It concerned me a little bit when I started, because because of my ileostomy bag. When I was on my old diet, I used to have to empty it sort of maybe 8, maybe 10 times a day, and it was also get quite bloated and fill it with air. And when I went into carnivore, I was doing it like once a day, really, twice. That's not because I actually had to, because I felt like I needed to, because I don't like it when it feels like heavy or whatever. But so that's another crazy thing that happened. So then I was thinking, some people tell you, oh, that meat's rotting inside you, and it's not passing through you. But now we know that's not true. Your body is absorbing it all, which is incredible. So I was like, I think I was about halfway through carnivore, because I've been doing it for, I think I'm coming up to my year now, actually, of doing this. So it's about halfway through there, and my I think my doctor rang me first, actually, and he says, "Look, Greg, have you made a decision about what you want to do with the drugs? Have you picked one?" I says, "I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want to take any drugs." And he says, "Well, what do you mean?" I says, "Well, I'm doing this thing called carnivore. I'm feeling pretty amazing, and I want to just carry on doing it and see where it takes me." And he wasn't very happy at all. His reaction actually quite surprised me, because you'd think that as your doctor, he would want to do what works for you and what, if you're feeling good, carry on, sort of thing. But no, he basically said, it's a bad idea, don't do it. And if I don't listen to what he's saying and take the drugs that he wants me to take, then my Crohn's, because I've got such an aggressive form of Crohn's, would spread to my part of my small bowel that absorbs all your nutrients. He says, look, if we have to take that away, which is likely, then your life expectancy is very, very low because your body won't be able to absorb anything. And basically, we can give you like a liquid or something that's supposed to help. But unfortunately, it won't help enough and you will not live very long. So I was thinking, wow, that's pretty scary. He's this guy I've listened to for the past 20 odd years suddenly telling me if I don't do what he says, then I'm basically going to be, you know, 6 feet under in no time at all. So I was like, no, I want to do it. He says, well, you do know there's no science behind the carnivore diet. There's no scientific evidence to say that it will work for you or anyone else. I says, no, I understand that. I says, but I believe that this could work for me and I want to try it. He says, well, do you accept the ramifications of what you're saying, Greg? I says, I do. And he says, right. Then he kind of like changed his persona and he was a bit chirpier because I think I basically said, I accept what happens to me, regardless of what
You'd
he's told me.
signed you'd signed the release or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then he's not liable, I guess. So that's what happened. And then he says, right, we'll schedule an MRI for you, and we'll just see how things are going from there. I was like, yeah, that's brilliant. So, and then after that, I think it was that my dietitian rang me, and then she, I had to look through a load of literature, sorry, before that about the FODMAP diet, and that made no sense to me whatsoever. Oh, the low FODMAP. I just couldn't get my head around it. It made no sense, and so basically, I didn't bother with it. Absolutely no, I just did carnivore instead. So when she rang, she was like, "Oh, hi, Greg, how you doing?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm good." She says, "Oh, how's the diet advice that that sent you going?" I says, "Well, I'll be honest, I didn't follow it, but I'm doing amazing." I says, I am losing weight. I says, but I'm losing fat and water. I'm retaining mostly muscle. I've got good energy levels, and my Crohn seems to be behaving itself. And she was like, "That's amazing. What are you doing?" I says, "Well, I'm doing a carnivore diet." And she had some idea of what it was. She said, "Was it like the paleo?" I says, "Oh, yeah, it's basically like that." I says, "But I don't eat any vegetables or fruits. It's literally just meat, occasionally eggs. I'd cut out bacon as well because I found that I reacted a bit to that, so I just kept it simple." And she just couldn't quite understand the fact that I wasn't eating carbohydrates. She says, "Well, you do know that the body does need carbohydrates and sugar." I says, "Well, yeah, they do." I says, "But you don't need exogenous ones. You don't need to get it from outside sources. Your body regulates all that." I says, I mentioned gluconeogenesis to her, and she knew what it was. But she said, "Oh no, Greg, that's an emergency system that your body uses." I says, "An emergency system?" She says, "Yeah, if you're like starving or whatever, gluconeogenesis will be there to help you out." I was like, that goes against what I've learned and what Bart K has taught me and many other people. Anyway, I just humoured her and I went, "Oh, okay, all right, that's fine." She says, "So you do know your brain needs carbs and your organs and they need glucose and blah blah blah." I says, "Yeah, I know. Like I say, gluconeogenesis," but she was adamant that it was a emergency system. She basically said that if I don't consume carbs and glucose, that my mood would slowly decline and I would be cranky all the time, agitated, and all these things. And she says, "You do know when you do that, and when that happens to you, Greg, that's your body telling you that you need these things." I was like, okay, well, it hasn't happened to me yet, but okay. she says, so she says, will you consider having carbs? I says, not really. I says, I'm doing pretty well without them. She says, no. She says, you need to eat carbs. I says, I'm not going to eat carbs. She says, I can't end this conversation, Greg, until you tell me that you will consider eating carbohydrates. So I just went, all right, I'll consider it. And she says, that's fine. That's all I wanted to hear. And that was the end of that, really. She says, we can end the conversation now. And she went away happy, thinking I was going to consider eating carbs when really it was never going to happen. So yeah, that was the end of that. Pretty interesting
I'm sorry, I'm
conversation.
just laughing at that because, like, running through the dietitian's mind, I wonder if she's actually thinking, well, I've added no value to this person's life today. Now I can end the phone call.
But yeah, essentially, yeah. She said she enjoyed the conversation because we talked about quite the sciencey side of nutrition, but we didn't really get anywhere. So I don't think I'll be talking to her again, to be honest. But yeah, she was a nice lady. So yeah, so basically, I've just been following Carnivore now, but for about 6 to 8 months, and then I started to get, not, I won't say pain, but I was reacting more to certain things. So I looked into it a bit more, and I went straight onto the Lion diet. So on the Lion diet, all I've been doing is eating mincemeat and drinking water, and I've been doing that for the rest of the period of the time that I've been on Carnivore, including up until the last couple of weeks. I've been eating roughly 13 to 1400 grams of mincemeat a day, which equates to about 3.5, nearly 4,000 calories. If you believe in calories, which we don't, but we'll say it anyway. So yeah, and again with my bag, it's I hardly have to empty it at all, even eating that amount of mass of food, which is mad
And
to me.
sorry, just going on to Lion, that resolved the issues you were having?
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, when I transitioned onto Lion, just eating mince with a bit of added beef dripping or tallow, however you describe it, that resolved those issues, and that's what I've been doing up until recently. But yeah, that it's been all right actually. I didn't think it was as bad as I thought it was going to be, because people go, "Oh, you just eat mince." Oh yeah, you just put a bit of salt in there and away you go. Or you can make it into things, can't you? Just to make it a bit more interesting, rather than just eating a tub of mince. But I was in that mindset that I was doing this because my goal was to get my Crohn's under control at any cost. So if I had to eat food that looked like mush and that everyone else said was disgusting, I didn't care, because I knew I was doing this for a reason, and that my mindset, I was just fixed on that. So, but yeah, it's been good doing the Lion diet for sure. And I know that Dr. Chaffee's basically does say that for autoimmune issues, the Lion diet is the best thing to do, really. Yeah, so it's been good.
Yeah, and so how long ago did you go for the MRI?
So coming up to about 2 weeks ago, is it now 2, 3 weeks ago that I had my MRI? Something like that. I might even lose track of time, but it's very recently. Very recently. So it wasn't long after I had spoken to you the first time. So the first time I spoke to you, I then had my MRI on that Sunday, which I think was about 4 or 5 days later after I spoke to you. And they said it would take about 2 to 3 weeks to get the results. Well, after that, I was getting itchy feet because I just wanted to know, like, is my disease progressing? Even though I felt great, I thought I need to know, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Because even though yes, how you feel is a good gauge of what's happening to you. For me, you can't truly know what's going on inside you. You can't see that, because I've been well before on drugs, um, but behind the scenes, things haven't been going well, internally, even though I felt okay. for the most part. So anyway, I got to the point where I was like, they're taking too long. So I rang them. And I said, oh, have you had my MRI results? And they said, oh, we've had the results, but we haven't looked over them yet. I was like, oh, okay. She says, well, we'll get the team to look over them. We'll get back to you. So it's about 20 minutes later, they rang back with the results. I was at work at the time. I work with caravans, repair caravans. So I was inside a caravan. I'm having this phone call. I know that I shouldn't be doing that. Sorry, boss. But so they rang me back 20 minutes later and said, hi, Greg, we've got your results. We've had a look over them. The results are that you have no active Crohn's disease. And I was like, wow, well, just saying it just floods me with emotion. But yeah, no active Crohn's disease. I says, can you repeat that? She says, yeah, you've got no active Crohn's. And yeah, sorry. I couldn't quite believe it. So
I didn't know what you were going to say.
Yeah, so no active Crohn's. And I says, well, does that mean that I haven't got Crohn's anymore? They said, oh, no, you've still got Crohn's, but you've got no active disease currently. I said, well, thank you. You've made my day. So I hung up and I just had a little minute to myself. I'm not ashamed to say because I'm doing it now, but I did have a little cry because I was just overcome with emotion. Because as great as Carnivore has been, it is difficult when you're trying to do it on your own. So it's important to have a community of people you can talk to about that sort of thing. And it did help my mum doing it as well. That did help. But mainly I did feel quite isolated going through this process. But in my mind, I was focused on doing it, and I got the result I wanted. I just couldn't believe it. And then after I'd sort of had a minute to just gather myself, a sense of elation came over me, and I kind of felt like how it would feel, I guess, if you'd won the lottery. And I felt like, wow, I've done it. I've stopped my Crohn's disease by just eating meat, and how is that possible? I spent years of my life on drugs and having these different weird things done to me. None of it has ever really got the result that I've achieved now, and without drugs, and it's crazy. So then I was like super excited. So all the lads at work knew what I was doing. So I was going around all the lads, saying, hey guys, I've my results, and telling them what they were. And they just couldn't believe it. They were super happy, obviously, but they just couldn't believe that I'd managed to stop my Crohn's, essentially. Yeah.
It's just amazing. Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
just awesome. Wow.
So,
So I guess that 1,400 grams of mince every day tastes so much better now.
yeah, it does. But one of the lads was like, I suppose you've got bragging rights now because you proved what you were doing was correct. I says, no. I says, I don't see it that way. It's not about one-upmanship. It's not about I told you so. It's about what I'm doing, what I thought was the right thing to do. I never started this to one-up my doctor or to prove to anyone else but myself that this was possible. Because that's not me. I'm not the kind of guy that go around and say, "Oh, I told you so, told you so." At the end of the day, I didn't really even know this was going to work either. So, once the teams actually spoke to me from the hospital, and I say they gave me the results, but my actual specialist is yet to call me. He's going to ring me in July, and I'm thinking he's probably going to say that it wasn't the Carnivore that's done this. That's going to be fun, but whatever he says, it doesn't matter because I have no active disease, and whatever he says cannot take that away. So it's just incredible.
Yeah. So how did your partner react to the news?
Yeah, so she was happy, obviously. she wasn't quite sure as to whether I'd actually cured my Crohn's or whether I was just in like it was in remission, or because I'd been okay previously through certain points in my life, but still had Crohn's obviously, and then I got bad again. So she wasn't quite sure if it meant that that wouldn't happen again or not. But anyway, she was happy either way. Um, but for me, in my mind, if I've cut out what was triggering the Crohn's and I don't ever introduce that back, then technically no more Crohn's, right?
Yeah, I mean, remission or cured or whatever, it doesn't really matter if you don't reintroduce this stuff, right? It's like
Yeah,
saying, well, your type 2 diabetes is only in remission until you start eating carbohydrate again. And it's like, well, I'm not going to eat carbohydrate again. So,
yeah,
it's cured.
exactly. Yeah, that's right. So for me, I haven't actually said that yet, but yeah, technically, I guess I'm cured. Um, I mean, I know there are other factors like stress and environmental things that can affect inflammation in the body, but if you keep those in check as well, and I think I've said it before, but carnivore really does make you handle stress in a different way. Um, so I'm not worried about that at all. Um, so yeah, it's incredible, and I just can't believe it. My whole family is just absolutely elated. My mum is like super happy because, like I said in the previous video, that she was completely against me doing this until she tried it for herself, and now she's like 6 months plus into it. Um, but I've been spreading the word. When you're so excited and you know that something works. I've been like saying, oh, you need to try this, but not forcing it on people, obviously. But so I've got my auntie's currently doing it, my cousin as well. They've started it like I think last week. My auntie especially was quite skeptical because she's really into health and holistic type things, and she's not really a big meat eater, but I think she's seen how it's affected my mum and how it's affected me, and I think she wants to give it a go. So that's pretty awesome.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
yeah. So I'll keep spreading the word. I think now as well, now that I've got like no active disease, I'm going to start introducing more carnivore-based foods into my diet now, and just see how I go with those, just gradually, just to branch out a bit because it'd be nice to be able to make a carnivore meal for myself and my partner and eventually my son, and eat together. Because at the moment we're sort of eating separately because I'm just eating mince, aren't I? So um, yeah.
So, how speaking of your son, how old is your son now?
So he's 9 months,
9 months.
9 months old. Yeah.
9 months.
And we've got him on a pretty much ketogenic diet. So we do give him some fruits and vegetables. He can't really chew it properly. He's only got 2 teeth, but I'm trying to make sure that he eats plenty of eggs and meat. We get some deli meat from the butchers. We'll give him chicken. Made him a little burger the other day, quite like that. It's interesting to see his reaction to these foods as well when he eats certain types of foods. But I think I'm not going to force carnivore on him or on my partner. Because I don't think I'll need to. But it's one of the things. If he sees what I'm doing, he might want to do the same. That's up to him. But yeah, so far so good.
So, look, Greg, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this update with us. It's really good news. Um, just for people that want to reach out to you, do you your contact details? Is it best to get in contact with you via social media, or how should they do that?
I don't really have any social media, so I'm not on Facebook or Instagram or anything. You can link my email address in the bottom if you want. That's fine. But yeah, if someone wants to ask me some questions or anything, that's fine. All I would say is, go for it. I think you have to take a leap of faith sometimes in life, and some of the times it pays off, and this time it has, and it's just incredible. Um, yeah, definitely stick with it for sure.
Well, I'll link to your email below. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing such good news, Greg. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me on.